Welcome to Restoring Childhood on the Same Page, where we're literally trying to get on the same page with Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation. Today, we're going to be talking about Chapter 5, about the 4 foundational harms. I have 3 wonderful guests with me today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and we'll start over here.
Sure. My name is David Walker, and I work at Capshaw Elementary School. I'm a school counselor and social worker.
And I'm Jim Batson. I'm a pediatrician here at Toccoa Pediatric Associates in town.
And my name is Kassie Hunley, and I'm the Putnam County Schools Behavior Specialist.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I chose you all for, various reasons. I think you all have great insight into this chapter specifically with all you do. I mean, in the school setting, you see a lot of this. And then as a pediatrician, I know that you know all about this and see all about it. Also, he doesn't like when I say this, I don't think, but he is like Cookville's pediatrician. Everybody I know prefers Dr. Batson. So, yeah. And then Hunley, we co-taught together for many years, got to see each other in action in the classroom. But those middle school years are some of the toughest years, I think, for the kids, where they're impacted by this. And now you're kind of approaching things work-wise from a different angle. And so I really thought that would be some good insight to get in here. So thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
All right, so let's jump right into it. I have all my wild little tabs and things. So this chapter really focuses on what Jonathan Haidt calls the 4 foundational harms. And those foundational harms are social deprivation, sleep deprivation, addiction, and attention fragmentation. And in the beginning of the chapter, I want to make sure we touch on at least all 4 of the harms at some point. But at the beginning of the chapter, he kind of lays it out. So just in that first little part, before we kind of get into the actual harms, were there any things that stood out to you or that were really like jumping off the page at you?
I like in the kind of the introductory section, he quotes a psychologist from the early 20th century, Thorndike, who he describes a certain experiment that he performed, but he said that animal learning is, quote, the wearing smooth of a path in the brain, not the decisions of a rational consciousness, unquote. And that encapsulates a lot of, I think, what happens with when you get overstimulated with almost anything. Those areas of your brain that it stimulates, it gets smoother and smoother and easier, and when you're forced out of that zone, it is very, very difficult.
Yeah, I highlighted that as well. And he says, the one impulse out of many accidental ones which leads to pleasure becomes strengthened and stamped in. So that sort of, he's talking about the feelings that, I guess is it the addictive feelings or the pleasures that people are getting from the smartphone usage that are causing this smooth paths in their brain?
I think so. I think to a certain degree, it just becomes so. It's got a different style, so to speak, than chemical addiction, but there's a lot of similarities. I've heard and talked to many teachers, especially high school teachers, that when the kids are forced to put down their phone, sometimes they notice some jitteriness.
Yeah.
And just like anxiousness, like what do I do now? What do I do with my time? You know, it becomes so ingrained in certain kids' psyches that it's hard to deviate. And that's not true of all kids. I mean, I just want to make that clear. It's not true of all kids, but there is a sizable percentage that it becomes close to, if not full-on addiction.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned kind of the jitteriness, because I wondered this school year going into the first time us introducing these cases with the phones and the phones being locked away for the full day on middle school level, I kind of anticipated seeing kids walking around like, I need my fix. And I've been very surprised so far that it's been calm. And a lot of the kids have said like they actually prefer it because they don't have to worry about it. However, where I start to see the addiction come in is as soon as they get those phones back at the end of the day, a lot of them are suddenly just back on them. And that's when you really see it. But throughout the day, I haven't seen that. And I've been surprised by that. So he moves on. he talks about the arrival of the phone-based childhood. He says originally it was not designed. He's talking about like the early iPhone and how handy it was. It was like the modern day Swiss Army knife in technology form. And he said it's not designed to be addictive or monopolize my attention. But now we saw how the apps and all of this have created it to become that. What are other things just that might have stood out to people in this early section?
In that section, I really like what stood out to me on the arrival of phone-based childhood was when he said, the people with the least willpower and the greatest vulnerability to manipulation were, of course, children and adolescents whose frontal cortexes were still highly underdeveloped. And it made me think about like our kids in middle school and their addictive, like how addictive they got to their phones and how it really, it impacts adults. Like as I read this, it definitely impacts me. And a lot of this stuff is relatable to me as an adult. But I think about our 8th graders and how like greatly they were impacted. And they're like littles that I work with now. So I do work countywide, but I work a lot with littles and they're on their pads or their tablets and how much they want that or they request it. And they're very vulnerable. And this just kind of stuck out.
And I see a lot of the, and we see a lot of the littles that are introduced very early to this type of environment. And there's very few statements that I make in a clinic visit, for example, that I almost get 100% same response to. And when I ask someone, so let's say they're 4-year-old or 5-year-old, when your child is on a device of some sort for 2-3 hours at a time, what's it like when you have to get them off of it? And 100% of the time, and they roll their eyes and like, oh, it's World War III, right? I mean, it's just a huge, huge fight. And it's across the board every single time. And that's one of the things I use to try to emphasize, not to de-emphasize their use in early ages, especially.
I mean, from an early age, we're learning coping skills and coping strategies. And I think that not only do when we don't, as parents, we don't model healthy, phone use, and they learn from watching us, but certainly when we see that they're distracted or upset or agitated and we pass them a screen, they learn that this is how I cope. And so there's the brain, addictive aspect of it, but there's also the behavioral aspect. It's just a pattern. It's a behavioral pattern that we learn, and kids just go back to what they are taught. It's a default setting.
Yeah, and I do appreciate how he opens the chapter up on the first page, and he's talking about his own child, and he says that his own child said to him when she was only 6 years old, she was on her iPad and it was time for her to get off, and she said, "Daddy, can you take my iPad away from me? I'm trying to take my eyes off it, but I can't." And I mean, this is the author's child, and just like that addiction at such a young age.
That's right. That's the dopamine reward loop, that I've heard it described as trying to peel your brain off of fly paper.
Oh, yeah.
To put down that phone when you're caught in that loop. It's hard.
Yeah.
It is very difficult.
So, I guess we understand the impact that this is having to like a service level. But when I first read this chapter, I feel like he really lays out the harms really well. And so the first one he speaks about is social deprivation, and how the impact of the kids being on these devices and things is affecting them socially. I'm sure. Well, all three of you see this, but like, how are you seeing that on the kind of elementary level? What are you seeing?
I think that, so there's a couple things. The way that you learn social interaction when you're face to face with somebody is sort of this synchronous, you're watching, facial expressions, you're learning to empathize, you're learning to respond when somebody has a particular emotion that they're demonstrating. And when you're doing it in an asynchronous fashion, online, it's not real time, and you're not watching people's faces, and you're not learning how to interact with somebody else in a way that feels natural and feels normal. And so that's a part of the deprivation at first, is just not having that quantity that we are used to having, or that we really need to have, I think, to learn how to interact with people in a natural way.
In an extreme situation, especially, and he talks about the differences between boys and girls, especially when, let's say, a stereotypical boy, preteen, for example, is spending 6-7 hours online gaming.
Yeah.
They get to a point, some of them get to a point where they're better at online relationships than offline.
Yeah.
And then let's say you've got a situation where you've got a child that's, say, mildly on the spectrum and has some difficulty with social interactions anyway. Well, a lot of them are going to prefer that world because they don't have to learn those skills. They don't have to, right. And it's that smooth path that they don't want in the brain that they don't want to deviate from.
Yeah. So I highlighted a few things here, and exactly what he's saying here. Children need face-to-face, synchronous, embodied physical play. The healthiest play is outdoors and includes occasional physical risk-taking and thrilling adventure. And I think this is the thing. We spoke about it a few episodes ago on the risky play episode, but this thing that kids need play, they need risk, they need adventure. And though the virtual world can offer kind of a simulation of that, it can never offer the real version of that.
And that's kind of the danger of it really summarized well, is that it gives the impression of the social interactions that we know that we really need. We have friends, we have, people who like the things that we do.
Yep.
It gives the impression of it, but it's not the real thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like whenever you're communicating online, you don't understand tone. You can't relate to tone. There is no such thing. You can't tell someone's happy or sad or aggravated. And that's something that you get when you have conversations in real time that these kids are lacking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about this with like just a simple text message and how there are so many ways you could read that. Like the word fine, like it can be like fine or fine or fine, and
It's all in intonation
Yeah.
and facial expression.
Yeah.
Things like that you miss online.
Yeah.
Even when it's face to face, it's not quite the same. You can miss a lot, even on FaceTime and things like that.
Absolutely. I marked this section here. Phones interrupt our face-to-face. And I was just going to read this little segment here, but it says the sharp drop of time with friends actually underestimates the social deprivation caused by the Great Rewiring, because even when teens are within a few feet of their friends, their phone-based childhoods damage the quality of their time together. Smartphones grab our attention so powerfully that they merely vibrate in our pockets for a tenth of a second. Many of us will interrupt face-to-face conversations just in case the phone is bringing us an important update. So it's not only just this time that they're spending on the phones away from other teens, but, and this is with adults as well. We are together in a room, we're talking, and the phone buzzes and we look at it. And in that moment, I'm saying that whatever is happening there is more valuable than what is happening here. How does that play out, like in sort of the realms that you see that with child development and stuff? Like, how does that play out with the kids? How do you think that's impacting them?
I think it speaks to our ability to express value to one another, and the kids pick up on it. When the phone buzzes and you stop mid-sentence to check it, that communicates a lack of value, and that's subtly discouraging.
Yeah.
I think on here he talks about how it says that you're not as important as the people in my phone. And I have nieces and I spend a lot of time with them. And we went to Target on Friday, and we get to Target and she says, Case, you were on the phone most of the car ride. And she's right, I was, and I was working. But like that spoke volumes, right? That like she wasn't valued in the drive down there, and that I was on the phone the majority of that drive and I wasn't interacting with them. So when I'm reading through this, while this does relate to children, it relates to adults too.
Yeah.
And that's where the modeling comes into play.
Yeah.
Just go to any restaurant, and for the past decade or so, and you see it, that everybody's down, everybody's at the table looking at their phone most of the time.
Yeah.
And just devil's advocate a little bit, there are times and place where you need to have the child's attention somewhere else, like if you're cooking dinner or if you're taking a shower or if you're whatever. There are certain times and places that screen time is perfectly fine. But when you use it as a default, like you were saying, anytime that there's a outburst or any time that there's an issue, and you constantly do that. It's just that feedback loop.
Yeah. And I think specifically for teens, he says, it's painful to be ignored at any age. Just imagine being a teen trying to develop a sense of who you are and where you fit in, while everyone you meet tells you indirectly you're not as important as the people on my phone, which is what you said. And that's like, middle school is a hard age, and that's why I love being a middle school teacher, and it's why a lot of people hate being middle school teachers. It's a rough age.
It's my favorite.
Yeah, me too. We're the same type of nuts up, but yeah.
Correct.
But yeah, we love middle school age because we understand it's a hard time. Their bodies are going through all these changes physically, internally. They have hormones just raging through their bodies, and I just remember that age feeling angry and not even knowing why I felt angry. Like, I have no idea. Like, why are you mad? I don't know. I'm just mad, and they don't know. And so to think about what I went through as a teenager, what everybody goes through just naturally, and then adding all this in there really makes me take a step back and say, like, wow, what can we do to alleviate this?
And this is where a lot of the sleep deprivation comes into as well. Go ahead if you had a comment.
I was just going to say, in regard to the social deprivation part of it, I think that we're not teaching kids what real success socially in terms of human interaction looks like. They've got this sort of fake idea of what social success, or healthiness rather is probably a better word, looks like.
Yeah.
How many likes and follows, how
Yeah.
viral am I going, and all these things. And I sound like such an old dude saying that, but that's the sort of cultural definition of what social healthiness looks like, or success.
Yeah.
And that's not even close to what it looks like to be healthy socially.
Yeah.
We were talking about this before I got here, about the value of likes and how girls really need that. And I mean, I'm sure guys too. I can't speak to that, but like getting 200 likes on a picture in real life,
Right.
whenever are 200 people going to walk up and be like, Dr. Batson, I love that shirt that you have on, right? Like in real life, when are we going to get 200 people to just randomly compliment us?
Right.
So I think like that.
Sure.
And middle school age especially is the peak of the desire for conformity.
Yeah.
I mean, that is when it absolutely peaks, and it's a double-edged sword. They want to conform. So they want to, like when you tell your child that you're not getting a cell phone until high school, they feel devastated because all my friends are on TikTok or whatever. But yet as the parent, by doing that, you're going to make them more socially adept in time. But kids don't think that way. They think about today. They only think about today. They don't see 5-10 years down the road. That's our job. And that is the peak of it, because a great example. I used to teach a preparation for adolescence class at a church to 6th graders, and there was the author of the book was having some difficulty with his child in 7th grade or so, acting up in school and so forth, and he threatened him with the fact that, okay, if I hear another concern from your teacher, I'm coming to your school and I'm sitting in your classroom behind or right next to you. And nothing was more social suicide than something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Terrifying.
So it immediately stopped.
Yeah. We've threatened that before. Like, would you like to invite your parent into the class?
You want your mom to sit there, I'll pull up a chair.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you almost took us into it, and I think we should go ahead and do it. Let's talk about sleep deprivation. And we can start from this point, like just health-wise and all of this, especially for the teens. Like all kids need sleep. All of us need sleep, but to develop and grow, we need sleep. Where were you going to go with the sleep?
Well, it's like when you don't get enough sleep, it makes everything else worse.
Yeah.
It makes your attention worse.
Yep.
It makes your ability to focus worse. You nod off in school, you yawn, you're more irritable, that kind of thing. The emotional dysregulation gets higher whenever that's the case. And teenagers, even before cell phones, had a lot of difficulties with this because they're kind of night owls anyway, and so they stay up later. Well, they still have to get up at the same time, and so that goes on to the week, and then that's why they sleep till midnight or till midday or 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon because they're making their quote make up for that sleep during the week. But when you add screen time and the light stimulation at night, which tells your brain I don't need to make as much melatonin, then that keeps them up further, and it's this vicious cycle.
Yeah. And we see it all the time in middle school level, just having to wake up kids more than ever before, really, at least in my teaching experience.
I agree. And right after COVID, it was after TCAP testing, we had a conversation about how much time, like it was just when that thing came out on your phones where it tells you how about your screen time. Screen time, 5 hours this week or daily, whatever. So when that first came out, I didn't even really know what it was. And I didn't have TikTok at that point, but a couple of my students did. And that was part of our conversation was, well, what is your screen time? And I had a student who freely just told all the things, right? And he said, well, Miss Hunley, mine says that I have about 11 hours a day of screen time. Okay, like that's a lot.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, you're at school from 8 to 3, right? And then on top of that, you have 11 hours of screen time from somewhere, right? And some of that I'm sure was in school. Like that was a few years ago. So I'm sure some of that was in school. But when are you supposed to sleep and eat? And that was like part of the discussion, right? Like even then, so this is probably 3 or 4 years ago, I knew that you're not getting adequate sleep. Like you are definitely sleep deprived. Now, did he come to school and stay awake? Yeah, like I never had to wake this kid up. He did great. But 11 hours of screen time on TikTok
That's
or
a lot.
Instagram, like
Now sometimes those can be a little bit deceiving because sometimes it includes the time you spend listening and texting and listening to music and things like that. So, but still, your point is 100% valid because when you look and when that thing mine pops up at Sunday at 9 o'clock. Right every week it pops up right then, and it kind of gives you that week, of averages of what you've done that week, which is nice, and that's one of the things that I think that we need to emphasize with the modeling is to be aware of our own screen use and how much, especially we're doing it in front of our kids and in front of our teenagers, so because they'll do what you do. They don't do what you say, obviously.
Yeah.
They're kids. They don't do what you say. But they'll do what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. What is it looking like on the elementary level as far as like the sleep deprivation stuff goes? Are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. Just exhaustion. Just kids are tired. And I think that one of the points that he makes in the book, which is just great, is that just not allowing screens in bedrooms.
Yep.
It's just such a huge thing because it's a huge source of temptation. It is for me, and if it's a source of temptation for adults, it's really bad for kids. Not having that screen in the bedroom it cuts down on it. Right.
Absolutely.
I was talking to a mom today who. Part of her frustration was that her kid would sneak out of his room at night and go get her phone.
Wow.
And then they would get up in the morning and he's laying there in bed asleep with the phone in his hand.
Wow.
It is the addiction.
Yeah.
And to that point too, when we think about sleep deprivation, the exhaustion that comes from just having been scrolling, and the dopamine reward loop going on in your brain, that really wears you out.
It does. And I think that people don't, a lot of parents will say, well, they monitor their screen time, which is great, but do you put a timer on that phone?
Yeah.
Do you put, have you got the apps that it takes to, of course, kids will find a way around almost everything.
Yeah.
But, are you physically separating that child from the phone?
Yeah.
That kind of thing is, and I try to get the older teens, like the ones that are in high school that have cell phones and things that are scattered and have trouble with inattention, they can use their phone to that advantage to help, with those daily reminders during the day to kind of get things done and to focus. But again, that comes back to the modeling and the sleep. I had a 4-year-old or 5-year-old in the other day, and the grandparents brought him in. And their 2 complaints were, though the main complaint was he was not sleeping well. He was getting up multiple hours a night. And I always have 2 questions, basic first 2 questions. Number 1, where is he sleeping?
Yeah.
And of course they said with his mama. Like, okay, that's chore number 1 is get him out of mama's bed. And then number 2, how much screen time? And then both the grandparents went, like that. It was just, I mean, those 2 questions are big number two things that you have to address to get decent sleep.
Yeah, and I mean, I think about also just how easy it is as an adult. And one of the things I've thought a lot about recently is how these phones have become our Swiss Army knives. And so a lot of people don't even have alarm clocks in their room anymore, clocks on their bedside table, and use the phone. Well, that's this kind of like deadly cycle that happens where you wake up in the middle of the night, like whatever, and check the time. And so you just look at the phone to check the time. And then there's a notification. It's like, oh, well, what is this? And then you start scrolling. And then, like you said, the light is suddenly telling my brain it's 2:45 a.m.
Right.
But the light's like, oh no, it's morning time, wake up. And then you can't get back to sleep. And so then like lay the phone down, sleep a little, try to get to sleep, and you're like, I can't get to sleep. I might as well just scroll a little more. And then, I that's happened to me as an adult. And so if teens have that right there in their room, that's the same type of thing is happening.
I agree. I felt like you were describing me right then. Like I thought, Ryan, how do you know that? I do that all the time.
And before cell phones, it was still an issue, but not nearly the issue because of the mobility.
Yeah.
Like you said, screen time in general should be not allowed in bedrooms. But how many kids, even when, maybe not when I was little, nobody had a TV in their room when I was little. It was almost black and white. But by the time the 80s and 90s came around, there were a decent percentage of kids that had a screen in their room, a TV or maybe a home computer. But it wasn't mobile.
Yeah.
It wasn't something you could put into bed with you. It wasn't something you could hide under the sheets, that kind of thing. So he talks about that in the book, about the mobility was really a key factor when that became an issue with smartphones. Absolutely.
And then the TVs also weren't this box for like back and forth engagement where it's like, there it's got a show or whatever, but it's not like my whole self-esteem is put on this and I'm relying on, that. I did think it's very interesting that he noted, it was on page 124 and 125, he talked about how Netflix CEO talked about their addictive shows where people just sit and binge on Netflix. He said, we're competing with sleep on the margins. And so he says, like, what they're not really competing with any other companies or anything. What they're competing with is people's ability to stay awake.
Right.
And stay up late and watch these things.
And that's what a lot of the nefariousness of this is.
Yep.
I mean, these companies that's what they're doing. They're using psychological abilities and research to determine how they can best hook their audience.
Absolutely.
It's similar to what the tobacco companies did. When the tobacco companies, when smoking started to go down, they had to come up with a different way to addict a new generation of kids. And what did they come up with? Vaping.
Yeah.
Because most of the vaping companies are owned by tobacco companies.
Yeah.
So it's the same basic thing. It's just tech based.
Yeah. Okay, well, we are actually, I think we could talk about this for days. We're getting close to time, so I want to make sure we still hit on attention fragmentation and addiction. So what are some of the kind of high points that stood out to you all on attention fragmentation, harm number 3?
I think attention fragmentation is one of the biggest and most important of the 4 because so much of what goes on a screen is short bursts of, captures my attention for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and then I move on. And if it doesn't, then I get impatient, right? But the other point that he makes that's really good is the number of just notifications that that come across kids' phones in a day.
192 per day.
Which is crazy, and that's just catching their attention, drawing their attention away from things, preventing them from being able to keep attention on something for a prolonged period of time. Man, I remember one of the best things I ever did with my cell phone was just turn off all the notifications.
Yeah.
I turned off all the notifications and I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Peace.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's this fear of missing out, that kids have. They don't want to do it.
And that's true when you've got a normal amount of attention, ability. But when you've got deficiencies or difficulties with attention, when you've got true, clinical attention deficit issues and that kind of thing, then this is gas on a fire.
Yeah.
Because you you get this so much with screen time, then it correlates into the real world, and it's just it affects their emotions as well, because you can't. That's why they're so instantaneously irritable.
Yeah.
Because they're used to things happen rapidly, and then whenever there is a period off of a screen that's either boring or something happens that they don't like and they can't get out of that situation or whatever, that's when the emotions start to come out.
Get angry.
I like that he refers to it as off ramps. These little notifications are off ramps, and I think about that just like throughout trying to do a task, and then, like I said, you check the time, and then you see a notification, and there's an off ramp, and then you like put it back down, and then you hear a notification, you're like, oh, let me check that, and then there's another off ramp, and how fragmented just a simple task can become, and then this is like, I don't know, exponentially worse for the kids that have tons of apps, Snapchat, Instagram, BeReal. I don't think they're on Facebook anymore. Whatever, all the apps.
I didn't even know what BeReal was.
Okay, but yeah. So before we run out of time, I really want to get into addiction, and specifically, I like the trigger loop that he speaks about. But what stands out to you all about sort of the addiction aspect of this?
I think that behavioral pattern, I think learning to cope with things by being distracted, that's a behavioral addiction. It's a path, it's a well-worn pathway. And unless we teach kids that they can have a big, broad toolbox of things to go to when they feel frustrated or overwhelmed, the only thing they're ever going to know how to do, and I'm saying for kids, but it's true for me, it's true for all of us, is to just be addicted to go back to what feels like it's working, but it's really not working.
Yeah.
And he points out on page 135 that the universal symptoms of withdrawal from any addictive substance are anxiety, irritability, insomnia, and dysphoria.
Yeah.
And you see that when you've got a child or an adult that's used to that multiple hours a day intake of social media, unlimited internet access, that kind of stuff, and you stop it, especially against their will, you see those four things almost every time.
He also talks about how those things will go away if they can stay off the drug phones long enough for the brain to return to its default state, which usually takes a few weeks.
Yeah.
But a few weeks is a really long time, right? Like that's 3 weeks, 27 days.
Yeah.
That we're wanting, 27, it's not, it's 21. But that we're wanting to keep that away from kids to give their brains time to rewire and to change.
And that's why it's great to take a situation like a summer or a fall break or a Christmas break or things like that to try to institute or encourage that decreased use, to get to that point that they don't feel like it's a have-to everyday thing.
Yeah. Well, we are running out of time, but he kind of, the last sentence before he kind of sums everything up, he says, unfettered access to everything, everywhere, at any age has been a disaster, even if there are a few benefits. Because in the chapter, he does lay out some benefits that, there are certain demographics of kids who maybe can't, like you mentioned, someone on the autism spectrum or something, who there are benefits of online things and technology things, and certain disenfranchised groups who find community online where they might not in real life. But we've seen with all the research he's laid out, with what he's putting forth, that like we're at a point where we need to pump the brakes. And this unfettered access to everything, everywhere, at any age. I mean, from elementary, pre-K, to all the way up to adults, as we spoke. We need to kind of halt on what we're doing and reassess. Do you all have any kind of final thoughts on anything that you want to share?
I love that phrase, pump the brakes.
Yeah.
It is absolutely true. And he does a good job in the book of acknowledging the places where there are tremendous benefits and tremendous tools that we can find online. You mentioned helping kids that, utilize the alarms and different things to help with organization. Lots of great ways you can use screens. It's not all bad, but we have to pump the brakes and not be total immersion in it for it to be healthy and be balanced. And I think that's my big takeaway.
Yeah.
My big takeaway is I tend to go back to modeling behaviors, because if a child sees you doing it, they're more than likely going to do it. So you have to set an example of what you'd like to see in behavior before you see any change. That goes from all the way from infant, toddler, pre-K, and up. Because once you get into that loop of when they're young, when they act up and they're having some dysregulation issues, you go to that tablet or phone every time.
Yep.
It's going to add up, and it's going to be a huge issue later down the road.
Yeah. All right. Well, I really appreciate y'all for being here. I appreciate you all, and you all are some of the ones I call on the most to come around and speak on these things. And I appreciate what you do in our community as well. Like I said, you're Cookville's pediatrician, but you know, you.
I know some other pediatricians that would probably disagree.
Wait, they're not here.
I want to say thank you for all that you
Yes,
do, man. You crank out an amazing amount of good stuff, and you're making a huge impact in our county.
I appreciate it.
This is something that you believe in, and I think we all need to just believe in it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for helping us get on the same page.